For 38 years, I was the daughter everyone counted on and no one remembered. So when they forgot my birthday again, I bought a lake house with my bonus and posted one line. Then they showed up in my driveway. Before we get back to today's story, I have some exciting news to share. We have officially launched a brand new channel called Tales Beneath Skin. Over there, we are dedicating our platform to bringing you the juiciest, most jaw-dropping Reddit drama stories on the internet. We're diving deep into wild family feuds, shocking relationship betrayals, and epic tales of petty revenge. But we don't just leave you hanging with a cliffhanger. We track down every single update, plot twist, and final resolution so you get the complete, satisfying story from start to finish. Grab your popcorn, because we are serving all the tea with full context, community reactions, and top-tier narration that brings the chaos to life. Make sure to subscribe to Tales Beneath Skin right now so you don't miss out. You'll find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag. Thank you for your continued support as we grow this community. Now, back to the story. The pen the closing agent handed me was one of those cheap plastic ones with the company logo half worn off. And I remember thinking, of all the things to notice, that a pen this ordinary shouldn't be the tool that changed my life. But there I was, 38 years old, sitting alone at a laminate conference table in a title office that smelled like burnt coffee and new carpet, signing my name 41 times to become the owner of a lake house. Not our lake house, not the family lake house. Mine. The agent, a kind woman named Deb with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, kept glancing at the empty chair beside me. "Is someone joining you?" she'd asked when I first walked in. "A spouse, or?" "No," I said, "just me." She smiled the way people smile when they've decided not to ask a follow-up question, and we got to work. It was June 9th. My birthday. I want to be clear about that timing because it matters, because it is the whole spine of this story. I had scheduled the closing for my birthday on purpose. It felt like a small, private ceremony, a gift I was handing to myself the way you'd hand a fragile thing across a table, carefully, with both hands. You see, I had spent 18 years earning that gift. I started at Meridian Logistics at 20 when I was too broke to finish my associate's degree, unloading trucks on the night dock in a warehouse so cold in January that we wore fingerless gloves and wrapped our shins in cardboard. I learned the routing software on my breaks. I stayed late without being asked. I took the certifications no one else wanted, the boring ones about hazmat classifications and customs paperwork, and slowly, unglamorously, over almost 2 decades, I became the person the entire Eastern region called when a shipment vanished or a client threatened to walk. Regional Operations Manager, corner-adjacent office. And that spring, after we salvaged the biggest account in company history over a brutal 10-week stretch where I slept maybe 5 hours a night, they gave me a bonus larger than my father had made in 3 years of his life. My father. I keep a small wooden loon on my desk, hand-carved and hand-painted, the black and white of the feathers faded now to soft grays. He made it the winter before he died, when I was 19. He loved the northern lakes, loved sitting in a rented aluminum boat at dawn, listening to the loon's call across the water, and he used to say a thing that I've carried my whole life without fully understanding it. Still water hides the deepest current, Chloe. The quiet ones, the still ones, that's who you watch. I thought he meant it as a warning about other people. It would be a while before I understood he might have been describing me. So there I was, signing. Deb slid the last page across, I signed the last of my 41 signatures, and she said, "Congratulations, Ms. White. It's officially yours," and she actually clapped, just a little, just 2 soft claps, and I felt my eyes sting. And in that exact moment, my phone buzzed on the table. I flipped it over so fast because some hopeful animal part of me thought, this is them. They remembered. They're calling to say happy birthday and where are you and let's celebrate. It was a text from my brother Danny. "Hey sis, quick Q, do you still have the login for Mom's electric account? Vanessa's trying to help Mom set up autopay and we're locked out. Also, do you know if the water bill got paid?" That was it. That was the whole message. No happy birthday. Nothing. I set the phone down very gently. Deb was still smiling at me, still glowing with the vicarious joy strangers sometimes give you, and I smiled back and thanked her and told her it was the best birthday I'd ever had. Which was true. It was just true in a way that had a crack running straight down the middle of it. Because here is the thing I had known, at some level, walking in. They had forgotten again. My family had forgotten my birthday for the 4th year running. And I had planned this whole day around not needing them to remember, and it still landed like a slap I somehow hadn't braced for. I drove the 90 minutes north to the house that was now mine. Gravel road, a mailbox leaning like a tired man, and then the trees opened up and there it was. A little cedar-sided place with a green metal roof and a dock reaching out into water so still it held the whole sky face down. I stood on that dock for a long time. Then I took out my phone and I took photographs. The water, the light, the empty 2 chairs on the deck that I would fill however I pleased. I posted them to the family group chat and to my own page, the one my mother and brother and Vanessa all followed, and under them I typed exactly 1 line and I did not add anything else, no smiley face, no explanation, nothing to soften it. Birthday gift. To myself. I locked the phone and I sat down in one of those 2 chairs and I listened for a loon. I didn't hear one, but I heard my own breathing, steady and even, for what felt like the first time in 18 years. I remember thinking, whatever happens next, I did this. Nobody can unsign my name. What I didn't know yet was that next was already in a car, already halfway up the interstate, and that the outrage I was about to unleash would tell me, at last, exactly what my family had always thought I was for. The first reply came 11 minutes later. I know it was 11 minutes because I watched the little bubble appear and disappear 3 times, the way it does when someone is typing and deleting and typing again, choosing their words with unusual care. That should have been my first clue. My family did not usually choose words with care where I was concerned. They spoke to me in requests and to-do items. The reply was from my mother, Barbara. Where did you get money for that? Not congratulations. Not it's beautiful. Not happy birthday, we're so sorry, we lost track of the date. The very first thing my 66-year-old mother wanted to know, faced with a photograph of her daughter's happiness, was where the money had come from. As if I must have stolen it. As if a lake house were a thing that could only exist in our family by theft or by scheme, never by 18 years of a woman putting her head down and doing the work. I stared at that question and felt something old and familiar rise in my throat, the specific loneliness of being suspected by the people who are supposed to be on your side by default. Then Danny, whoa, that's a lake house, like a whole property. Then Danny again, how much was it? Then, and this is the one I keep coming back to, a message from Vanessa. Vanessa Cole, my brother's girlfriend of 8 months, a woman I had met exactly twice, who had somehow inserted herself into the family group chat sometime that spring without anyone deciding to add her. Her message was long and warm, and it made the hair on my arms stand up. Chloe. Wow. First of all, happy Soul Day, beautiful. Dove, I want to honor whatever led you here. I do want to gently name something, though, from a place of love. Buying a big solo purchase like this right after such an intense work season can be a trauma response. Sometimes we reward ourselves to fill a void that's really about connection. Danny and I were just saying how worried we are that you isolate. This might be a moment for the whole family to circle up around you. Yellow heart. I read it 3 times. Every sentence was a small, soft weapon, trauma response. A void that's really about connection. We're worried you isolate. She had taken the single best day of my adult life and reframed it, in real time, in front of my whole family, as a symptom. As something to be worried about. As proof I needed them, needed to be circled up around, managed, brought back into the fold. And the fold, I was beginning to understand, now had a new center of gravity, and her name was Vanessa. I put the phone in my pocket and walked back down to the dock because I needed the water. And this is the part I want you to sit with, because it's the part I didn't have words for that night and only found later. I noticed the loon. I'd brought a box of desk things from work to move up to the house eventually, and the little carved loon my father made was sitting on top, black eye catching the last of the light. And my father's voice came to me, clear as if he were in the boat beside me. Still water hides the deepest current. The still ones, that's who you watch. I had always assumed he was warning me about quiet, watchful strangers. But standing on that dock, I thought for the first time, what if he meant that some people go still on purpose? What if he meant that some people make themselves smooth and calm on the surface, soul days and heart emojis and honoring your journey, precisely so you won't see what's moving underneath? Because Vanessa was very, very still. And in 8 months she had learned my whole family's logins, their bills, their auto-pay, their worries. In 8 months, a stranger had become the person my mother turned to and my brother quoted. My phone buzzed again. Danny, hey, so mom's kind of upset, can you call? Vanessa thinks it'd be good for us all to come up and see the place. Bond as a fam, when's good? I typed back one word, working, talk soon. I was not working. I was watching the water go dark, and I was thinking about my father, and I was just starting, to understand that the thing rising in the family group chat was not concern. It was alarm. The specific alarm of people who had built something on top of me and had just felt the foundation move. To understand why a lake house made my family panic, you have to understand what I had been to them and for how long. I was 11 when my father got sick, 13 when he died, and somewhere in those 2 years I became the family's second adult. My mother, Barbara, did not fall apart loudly. She fell apart quietly and administratively. She stopped opening mail, stopped answering the phone, stopped, in 100 small ways, doing the invisible labor that keeps a household from drowning. Danny was 8, still a baby really, still the golden boy, the one my mother would look at and manage a smile. So I opened the mail. At 13, I learned which envelopes were bills and which were final notices. At 15, I got a job at a diner and gave half of every check to my mother without being asked, and she took it without saying thank you, because by then it had already become the natural order of things. Chloe provides, and the provision goes unremarked, the way you don't thank the floor for holding you up. I want to be fair to my mother. Grief does terrible things, but grief is a season, and what I lived through was not a season. It was a role. And nobody in a role gets a birthday, because the floor doesn't have a birthday. The floor is just expected to be there. When Danny wrecked his first car at 19, I paid the deductible. When he dropped out of 2 different programs, it was me who talked to the registrar, me who negotiated the tuition refund. When he was 26 and got into what my mother delicately called a bad situation with some money he owed, I wrote a check for $4,000 I did not really have, and my mother cried on the phone and said, "You've always been our rock, Chloe." And I remember feeling the compliment land like a weight rather than a gift, because a rock is a thing you stand on, not a person you love. For 18 years, I was the rock. And I told myself that was okay, that this was just my part, that families need someone steady. My father had been steady. Maybe I was steady in his place. Then that spring, Vanessa Cole appeared. Danny brought her to Easter and I liked her, at first, the way you like a warm hostess at a restaurant. She was maybe 30, with the practiced calm of someone who has done a lot of workshops. She called herself a family wellness and manifestation coach. She had an online presence, softlit videos, a mailing list, a course called Roots and Radiance about healing your money story and calling in abundance. She said things like, "I hold space, and let's honor that feeling." And within about 20 minutes of meeting my mother, she had my mother nodding along like a woman who'd finally found the priest of a religion she'd always secretly practiced. At the time I thought, harmless. A little much, but harmless. But over the next few months, small things started to snag on me, the way a rough thread catches on a sweater. The first was the isolation. Slowly, my mother stopped calling me directly. If I called her, she'd say, "Oh, ask Vanessa, she's handling that now." Or, "Vanessa thinks I should rest, so we're keeping things quiet." When I suggested our usual Sunday dinner, it got rescheduled, then moved to Danny and Vanessa's apartment, then quietly stopped. A wall was going up between me and my own mother, and it was being built one gentle, loving-sounding sentence at a time. The second thing was smaller and stranger. At a dinner in April, Vanessa mentioned, when I was getting my counseling credential in Oregon, And then 20 minutes later, telling a different story, said she'd never lived out west. I'm an East Coast girl through and through. Nobody else caught it. I did. I'm a logistics person. My whole job is noticing when two facts that both claim to be true cannot both be true. I filed it away. The third was the worst, and I only pieced it together later. That spring, my mother took out a small home equity line of credit to do some updates. When I asked what updates, she got vague and then irritated. "Vanessa's helping me get my finances organized," she said. "She says I've been too dependent on you, that it's not healthy for me to lean on my daughter so much." That sentence stopped me cold, because on its surface it sounded almost good, almost like independence. But 18 years had taught me the difference between someone helping my mother stand on her own 2 feet and someone quietly walking my mother away from the one person who had never once profited from her. Vanessa had studied my family like a system, and she'd found the load-bearing wall. Me. And a smart operator who wants to move into a house doesn't argue with the load-bearing wall. She just convinces everyone the wall isn't holding anything up. The night after I bought the lake house, sitting in the dark on my new deck with my father's loon in my hands, my phone lit up one more time. It was a photo, sent to the group chat by Vanessa. A screenshot of my post, my water, my light, my one line, with text she'd added across it in a pretty script font. When someone spends big while emotionally disconnected, it's a cry for help. Let's love her back home. Yellow Heart family meeting at Barbara's, Saturday 10 a.m. I'll facilitate. She was scheduling a meeting about me. She was facilitating it. And she'd made sure to hold it at my mother's house, on her home turf, with her as the comm center and me as the item on the agenda. I looked at the loon in my hand. Still water, I thought. For 18 years, I had been the quiet one. The still one. Vanessa had spent 8 months making herself the stillest person in the room, and she was very good at it. But she had made one mistake, and it was the kind of mistake only a person who'd never actually looked at me could make. She thought I was the item on the agenda. She had no idea I was about to become the one holding the meeting. I did not sleep much that first night at the lake house, but somewhere in the small hours, lying on a bare mattress I'd dragged up from the car, something inside me changed its shape. For 18 years, I had absorbed. That was my whole method: absorb the cost, absorb the blame, absorb the silence, keep the family standing by taking the weight into my own body. And in that dark bedroom with the water lapping under the window, I felt the absorbing simply stop, like a muscle that finally put something down. I was not going to attend Vanessa's meeting to be loved back home. I was going to find out who Vanessa actually was. And I had one enormous advantage that she, in her careful study of my family, had completely overlooked. I was not, in fact, a load-bearing wall. I was a person with a phone, a spine, and a best friend named Renee Foster who had spent 14 years as a title officer at a real estate closing company, which is to say, a woman who read public records for a living and could pull the true history of a person out of the ground like a dentist pulling a tooth. I called Renee at 7 in the morning. She answered on the second ring, because that's who Renee is. "Happy belated birthday, you gorgeous recluse," she said. "I saw the lake house." I actually screamed. "Did your family lose their minds?" "That's why I'm calling," I said, and I told her everything. The forgotten birthday, the where did you get money for that, the Soul Day text, the trauma response, the family meeting Vanessa had scheduled to facilitate about me. And then I told her the 2 things that had been snagging on me for months, the Oregon that wasn't Oregon, and the fact that a self-declared money and wellness coach had in 8 months gotten my cautious mother to open a line of credit against her house. Renee was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice had changed, flattened out into the professional register I'd heard her use on the phone with clients. "Chloe, what's her full name?" "Vanessa Cole, at least that's what she goes by." "Goes by," Renee repeated. "Okay, I don't love goes by. Give me a few days. I want to look at property records, business filings, any civil judgments, the whole footprint. If she's a coach with a course and a mailing list, she's got a paper trail whether she likes it or not. Everybody thinks they're invisible online. Nobody is. Here is what I want you to understand about that phone call. I was not hiring a private investigator or hacking anyone or doing a single thing that wasn't a citizen's plain right. Renee was going to look at public records, the exact documents that are open to anyone who knows where to click. Vanessa had built her whole operation on being the calmest, most transparent, most healed person in every room. She had never once considered that transparency runs both ways, and that the still water she'd made of herself could be read by anyone who thought to look below the surface. While Renee worked, I did my own part. I had another piece of leverage Vanessa didn't know about, and it was almost funny how she'd missed it, because she'd been so busy telling my mother to stop, leaning on me, that she'd never asked what exactly my mother leaned on me for. The answer was everything. For years, I had been the informal administrator of my mother's financial life. I had set up her online accounts. I paid her property taxes when she forgot, which was most years. My name was on the checking account she used for household bills, added a decade ago, at her own tearful insistence, in case anything happens to me. I had auto-pay logins, I had statements, I had a clear, documented, decade-long record of exactly whose money had kept my mother afloat. Danny's text on my birthday, the one asking for the login to the electric account, that hadn't been random. Vanessa was trying to pry my hands off my mother's finances one utility at a time. She wanted the administrator role. She'd taken the emotional gatekeeping already. Now she was reaching for the money. So I logged in to my own mother's account that I had legal authority on, and I looked. And what I found made my stomach drop. The home equity line my mother had opened for updates had a first withdrawal of $9,000. The memo, in my mother's shaky handwriting scanned into the system, read, Roots and Radiance, Legacy Tier plus Private Mentorship, Vanessa. My mother, who had never in her life spent $900 on herself without agonizing, had borrowed $9,000 against her home to buy the top tier of her son's girlfriend's course. I sat back in my new lake house, in the morning light off the water, and I felt the last piece of the old me, the absorbing, accommodating, keep the peace me, go quiet and hard. Okay, I thought. Now I understand the meeting. She doesn't want to love me home. She wants me at that table, framed as unstable, so that when I object to what she's doing to Mom's money, everyone will hear it as a symptom instead of a warning. My phone buzzed. Danny, you coming Saturday. Mom really wants you there. Vanessa says it's important we don't let you slip away. I looked at the loon on the windowsill. Yeah, I typed. I'll be there, I would be there, just not as the item on the agenda. Renee called back on Thursday. I could tell from her first breath that she'd found something. Sit down, she said. I'm sitting. Vanessa Cole is a name she started using about 3 years ago. Before that, the same face, I found her on an old cached page for a wellness retreat in another state, went by Vanessa Colley. And Vanessa Colley has a civil judgment against her. Chloe, she was sued. A woman won a judgment against her for the return of $19,000 in a case where the filing describes, and I'm quoting the public complaint, funds solicited under the representation of a spiritual mentorship and elder financial wellness program. The water outside my window looked suddenly very far away. Elder, I said, elder financial wellness. The plaintiff was 71, Renee said quietly. A widow. Same play, Chloe. Get close, become the calm one, become the one who organizes their finances, sell them the expensive inner circle tier, and get access to the accounts. She lost that judgment. She never paid it. She changed her last name and moved. And now she's in your mother's house. I don't remember standing up, but I was standing up. 18 years of being the family's rock, and I had let a stranger walk straight past me toward my mother because the stranger had learned to use words like healing and honor and soul day. My father's voice, the still ones, that's who you watch. I had watched everyone in that family except the one I should have. Send me all of it, I said. The judgment, the old page, the name change, everything. Documented, sourced. I don't want a rumor, Renee. I want a record. Already compiling it, she said. And Chloe, I found the plaintiff, the widow. Her name and her attorney are in the public filing if you ever needed her to speak. I wrote the name down, and I looked at it for a long time. But I didn't want to detonate everything by text, in the group chat, where Vanessa could spin it into look how she attacks people when she feels threatened. I wanted the first crack to open in the one place it would matter most, in my brother. Because whatever Danny had become, soft, coasting, quoting his girlfriend like scripture, he was still the 8-year-old I'd raised half of. If I could get one true thing past the spell, I had a chance. So on Friday, the day before the meeting, I drove down and I asked Danny to get coffee, just us. He came, wary, phone face up on the table like a chaperone. I didn't lead with the judgment. I led with the $9,000. Danny, I said, did you know Mom borrowed against her house? $9,000. To buy the top tier of Vanessa's course. He blinked. She what? No, that's Mom's helping fund the launch. It's an investment Vanessa's cutting her in on. It's a home equity line, I said. It's debt against the house Dad paid off before he died, and the money went to a course sold by your girlfriend. I slid my phone across, the statement pulled up, my mother's shaky handwriting in the memo line. Roots and Radiance, legacy tier plus private mentorship. I watched him read it. I watched his face do something it hadn't done in years, which was to actually flicker with doubt. And then I watched him reach for the thing Vanessa had installed in him for exactly this moment. You've always been jealous of her, he said, but there was no heat in it, just recitation. Vanessa said you'd do this. She said the family's healthy person always gets attacked by the. Danny, I said it gently, the way you say a person's name when you're trying to reach them underwater. I raised you. I paid your deductible and your tuition refund and your $4,000. I have never once been jealous of anyone in this family because I never got the chance to want things. I was too busy paying for them. Ask yourself one question, just one. In 8 months, has Vanessa brought money into this family, or has she only ever moved it out? He didn't answer, but he didn't leave either. He sat there, and his coffee went cold, and I could see the machinery in him laboring against 8 months of gentle programming. Then his phone lit up on the table, face up. A text from Vanessa, we both saw it. Is she trying to poison you against me? Don't let her. Come home. We circle up tomorrow and we handle her together. Yellow heart. We handle her, not we help her. Not we love her home. Handle, like I was a problem to be managed. Danny stared at it, and for the first time I saw him read one of her messages not as a believer but as a witness. I have to go, he said, and his voice cracked on it and he left. But he took my phone number off silent. I knew because he called me that night at 11 and all he said was, send me what you have, all of it, and then he hung up before I could answer. I sent it. The judgment, the name change, the old cached page, the widow's name, and I said one more thing, tomorrow, let her run the meeting. Let her get all the way through it. I'll bring the rest. Vanessa knew something had shifted. Of course she did. Stillness like hers is really a kind of hypervigilance. She was always reading the room, and by Friday night the room had changed temperature. Her response was to do what people like her always do when the ground moves. She doubled down on control, and she moved up the timeline. At 6 on Saturday morning, 4 hours before the meeting she'd scheduled, my phone rang. My mother. I almost didn't recognize her voice, it was so thin. Chloe, Vanessa says you've been spreading terrible things about her. She says you're trying to break up Danny's relationship because you can't stand to see anyone else happy. Is that true? A pause, and then the part that told me exactly how deep it had gone. She says if you really loved this family, you'd add her to my accounts. To help me, so I'm not so dependent on you. She says your resistance is proof you've been controlling my money all these years. There it was, the whole play out loud at last. Get me removed as the administrator. Get herself added. Take the accounts, take the house that's now collateral, take my mother. I could have exploded. 18 years of swallowed hurt were right there in my throat. Instead, I heard my father and I went still, really still, the deep current kind. Mom, I said quietly, I love you. I'm going to be at the meeting. And I'm not going to argue with Vanessa. I'm just going to bring some paperwork, and I'm going to let all of you read it, and then everyone in that room can decide for themselves. Okay, just promise me you'll read what I bring before you sign anything. Can you promise me that? A long silence, then small, okay. That okay was the whole game. Vanessa needed my mother to sign without reading. I only needed her to read. Meanwhile, Renee had been busy through the night, and she'd done the one thing that turned my folder from an accusation into a case. She had called the widow's attorney. And the widow, her name was Aliner, 73 now, had said yes. Yes, she would tell her story. Yes, she was tired of being embarrassed and tired of being silent. Yes, if it might spare another family what it had cost her, she would get on a video call at 10 a.m. on a Saturday and look Vanessa Cole in the eye through a screen. She said, "One thing I have to tell you," Renee said. She said, "That woman told me my late husband's spirit wanted me to invest in her." Chloe. She weaponized a grieving woman's dead husband. And my father's carved loon was in my bag, and I thought, she has no idea what a grieving woman's dead father can do. I laid everything out on the lake house table one last time before I drove down. The judgment. The name change. The old page where Vanessa Colley smiled the same smile. The $9,000 memo in my mother's hand. Renee's typed, source summary. And a single sheet I printed and set on top, on which I had written what I actually wanted, because I had learned in 18 years of logistics that the point of proof is never the proof, it's the decision it forces. The sheet said, Barbara White to remove all non-family parties from any financial authority. Vanessa Colley/Cole to have no access to Barbara's accounts, credit, or property, effective immediately. I put my father's loon in my coat pocket where I could feel it. Then I drove down to my mother's house, where a stranger was waiting to facilitate a meeting about how unstable I was, and where, at 10 o'clock sharp, I was going to hand my brother his phone with Aliner already dialed. My mother's living room had been rearranged. That was the first thing I noticed when I walked in at 9:58. The couch and chairs had been pulled into a circle. A circle, of course, because Vanessa didn't hold meetings, she held healing circles. And in the center of the ring, on the coffee table, where my father's reading glasses used to sit, there was a lit candle and a small dish of what smelled like burning sage. Vanessa sat at the head of it, if a circle can have a head, in a cream linen outfit with her hands folded in her lap and her face arranged into an expression of infinite, patient sorrow. She had turned my mother's living room into her own turf, and she had no idea she'd just handed me the perfect stage. "Chloe," she said, warm and grave. "Thank you for coming. I know this is hard. Sit. We're all here because we love you." My mother sat to her left, hands twisting in her lap. Danny sat to her right, and he would not meet Vanessa's eyes, and I felt a small flare of hope because a believer looks at his prophet. I sat. I set my bag beside me. I said, "Thank you for organizing this, Vanessa. Why don't you go ahead and start?" I want to be clear that I did not interrupt her. I let her run the whole thing. This is the part I'm almost proud of, that I sat with my hands folded and let her build the entire structure so that when it came down, it would come down on her. She was good. I'll give her that. She spoke for 10 minutes in that low, hypnotic voice about how abundance can be a mask for avoidance, about how she'd noticed the family had one member carrying an unhealthy amount of financial control, about how true healing means releasing our grip. She never said my name unkindly. She said it tenderly, which is so much worse. And she built, gently, inevitably, to the ask. "So what I'm proposing," she said, turning to my mother, "as a first step in Barbara reclaiming her autonomy, is that we add a neutral, trusted person to help oversee things. Someone outside the old patterns." A soft hand pressed to her own chest. "I've offered to serve in that role. It would just be a signature, Barbara. A step toward freedom." She slid a paper across the coffee table toward my mother. And a pen, the cheap kind, and my mother, God help her, reached for it. "Mom," I said, quietly, just her name. My mother stopped, pen hovering. "You promised me you'd read what I brought first," I said. "Before you sign anything, remember." Vanessa's face did a very small thing then, a tightening at the corners, the first crack in the still water. "Chloe, we don't need to make this adversarial." "I'm not being adversarial," I said, and I opened my bag. I brought paperwork too. Vanessa brought a form for Mom to sign. I just think, before anyone signs anything today, everyone in this circle should get to read everything. That's fair, isn't it? You said this was about the truth. I looked right at her. Let's honor the truth. I saw her recognize her own words coming back at her, and I saw her calculate fast, the way a cornered smart person calculates, whether she could refuse without looking like exactly what she was. She couldn't, so she smiled. Of course. I handed the first sheet to Danny, and the second to my mother, and I kept talking in the calmest voice I owned, the voice I used to save accounts worth more than this house. This is a home equity statement, Mom. $9,000 borrowed against the house Dad paid off. The memo's in your handwriting. It went to Vanessa's course. My mother's face went gray. And this, I said, handing over the next page, is a civil judgment from 3 years ago, $19,000. Against a woman named Vanessa Colley. I looked up. Same face. Same smile. You can compare the photos, they're both there. She changed her last name after she lost that case and never paid the judgment. The room had gone absolutely silent. The candle flame stood straight up. Chloe, Vanessa said, and now the warmth was gone and something flat and fast had come into her voice. I don't know what you've cooked up, but this is defamation, and I'd think very carefully. The woman who won that judgment, I went on, was 71, a widow. I turned to my mother. The complaint says Vanessa told her that her dead husband's spirit wanted her to invest. My mother made a small sound. And that was when I took out my phone and I dialed and I turned it to face the circle, and Aliner's face appeared on the screen, 73 years old, silver-haired, steady-eyed, sitting at her own kitchen table. "Hello, Barbara," Aliner said gently. "My name is Aliner. I'm so sorry to meet you like this, but I heard she'd found another family and I couldn't stay quiet again." I set the phone in the center of the circle, right beside Vanessa's candle, and I did not say a word. Because I didn't have to. Aliner did it. In a voice with no anger left in it, only the flat weariness of someone who'd already paid, she told the whole thing, how a woman called Vanessa had come into her grief like sunlight, become her calm one, become the one who organized things, sold her the top tier, gotten onto her accounts, and left her $19,000 poorer and too ashamed to tell her own children for a year. "She told me my Harold wanted it," Aliner said. "She used my dead husband to take my money." So when I heard she had a Barbara now and a Lake House daughter in the way, Aliner looked, somehow, right at me through the little screen. I wanted to be in the way too. Vanessa was on her feet. The stillness had shattered completely now, her voice climbed and cracked. "This is harassment. This is a coordinated attack, Barbara, they're manipulating you. This is the exact isolation pattern I warned you about. The healthy one always gets." And she was reaching for her bag, for her coat, and the more she talked, the more the mask slid, until she wasn't a wellness coach at all, just a cornered woman throwing whatever she could grab. And my brother stood up. Danny stood up and he picked Vanessa's unsigned form off the coffee table, and very quietly, without drama, he tore it in half. Then he tore it again. He didn't yell. He just looked at her the way you look at a stranger, and he said, "You told me my sister was jealous. My sister raised me." His voice broke. "Get out of my mom's house." Vanessa looked around the circle she had built, at the faces that had all turned, and for 1 second the surface went completely flat and I saw what was actually underneath, and it was nothing warm at all. Then she gathered her bag and her linen and her sage, and she left. The screen door banged behind her. My mother was crying. She reached across the space where the circle used to be, and she took my hand, the rock's hand, that she had leaned on for 18 years without ever really holding, and all she could say was my name. "Chloe. Chloe, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I forgot your birthday. I forgot everything, I know, Mom," I said. And on the little screen, Aliner was quietly wiping her eyes, and I reached into my coat pocket and I closed my hand around my father's carved loon, and I thought, "Still water hides the deepest current, Dad. I was the still one all along. She just never thought to watch me." Vanessa Colley, did not go to prison. I want to be honest about that, because these stories sometimes end with handcuffs and this one didn't. What happened to her was quieter and, I think, more complete. It started with a record, because a record, once it exists, does not unexist. Renee helped me organize everything into a clean, sourced document, and Aliner's daughter, who it turned out had been quietly furious for a year, connected with a local reporter who covered a piece on people posing as elder wellness coaches to gain access to seniors' finances. Vanessa wasn't named in a way that could get anyone sued, but the details were unmistakable to anyone who knew her. And the online world she'd built her whole con on turned out to be a house made entirely of glass. Roots and Radiance went dark within a month. The mailing list evaporated. The softlit videos came down. You cannot run a business built on the illusion of being the most trustworthy person in the room once the room has seen the judgment with your other name on it. Eleanor, with her daughter's help and a small nudge from the renewed attention, finally moved to collect on the judgment she'd won years ago and never enforced. The last I heard, wages were being garnished. The $19,000 was coming back to her, slowly, dollar by dollar, from a woman who had assumed shame would keep her victims silent forever. It hadn't. That, to me, was the sweetest justice of all, not that Vanessa was punished by a court, but that the two women she'd counted on to stay quiet, a widow and a rock, had found each other and refused to be quiet anymore. My mother closed the home equity line. It took us a weekend at her kitchen table, the two of us with the laptop and a pot of coffee, and it was the first time in maybe a decade that we did the household paperwork side by side instead of me doing it alone in the dark. She apologized more times than I could count, and I finally had to tell her to stop, because I didn't want an apology to become one more thing she carried. What I wanted was different, and I told her so. "I don't want to be the family rock anymore, Mom," I said. "I want to be your daughter. Those aren't the same thing." She cried, but she nodded, and she has been trying. She is not a perfect mother, and I am not a woman who expects one now, but she calls me directly. She remembers she has a daughter with a life. It's not a fairy tale. It's better than that because it's real. Danny is the one who surprised me. Breaking free of Vanessa cracked something open in him, and to my genuine shock, he didn't just drift back into being the golden boy. He got a real job, a boring one, a warehouse job, the kind I started in, and one night he called me and asked, awkwardly, if I'd teach him the money stuff, the stuff you always did for us. We've had dinner every other week since. He's paying my mother back for what Vanessa took, a little each month, and he insisted on it, and I didn't stop him, because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a person is let them carry their own weight for once. I understand that better than anyone. As for me, I spend my weekends at the lake house now. The two chairs on the deck are no longer both empty. Sometimes Renee is in one, sometimes Danny, sometimes my mother, once memorably, Eleanor, who I invited up because it turned out she'd loved the northern lakes with her Harold, and who sat on my dock at dawn and cried in a good way and told me my father would have liked the light off the water. My father's loon sits on the windowsill facing the lake, where I think he would have wanted it. I turned 39 this June. My family did not forget. There was a cake, and it was slightly lopsided because Danny made it himself, and my mother gave me a card she'd clearly agonized over, and we ate on the deck while the light went gold and long across the water. And just as it got dark, out across that still lake, a loon called. One long, rising note, the loneliest and most beautiful sound in the world, and then, after a moment, another one answered it from somewhere across the water. I sat very still, and I listened to the two of them call back and forth in the dark, and I thought about 18 years of being the quiet one who held everyone up, and I thought about the day I signed my name 41 times and gave myself the one gift no one else had thought I deserved. Still water hides the deepest current. Mine had been running underneath the whole time, patient and strong, waiting for the day I'd finally let it move. I'd let it move. And the water had never looked so much like the sky.